Let's talk about something that goes far beyond a tennis ranking. Let's talk about what it actually means when a 21-year-old from Manila, Philippines, walks onto the grandest stages in professional tennis and not only belongs there, but thrives there. Because what Alexandra EALA has done over the last couple of years isn't just impressive from a sports standpoint. It is historically significant. It is culturally enormous. And if you haven't been paying close attention, you need to sit down right now and understand exactly what is happening because this story is moving fast and the numbers behind it are more compelling than any headline you've read so far. Let's start at the beginning because context matters here. The Philippines is not traditionally a tennis nation. When you think about the countries that produce elite Grand Slam competitors, you think about the United States, Spain, Russia, France, Serbia. You do not automatically think about a country whose sporting identity has been built almost entirely around basketball and boxing. That's the environment Alex EALA comes from. That's the backdrop against which every single milestone of her career needs to be measured. Because she didn't have the infrastructure, she didn't have the generational pipeline of coaches and academies and national federation funding that players from tennis powerhouse nations take completely for granted. And yet, here she is. EALA was born in Manila, and from an early age, the talent was impossible to ignore. She eventually found her way to the Rafa Nadal Academy in Spain, one of the most respected and demanding junior training environments on the planet. That's where young players from across the world go to sharpen their technical foundation, build their competitive mentality, and prepare for the brutal grind of professional tennis. And EALA didn't just survive that environment, she excelled in it. She won the Australian Open junior doubles title at just 14 years old. Let that number sink in. 14. And later, she captured the Roland Garros junior title, which announced to anyone paying attention that this was not an ordinary talent. This was something rare. But here is what separates truly great players from talented juniors who never quite make the leap: the ability to grind. Because the jump from junior tennis to the professional WTA tour is one of the most brutal transitions in all of professional sports. The margins are tighter, the opponents are faster, the scheduling is relentless. And if you're coming from a country without an established tennis infrastructure, you don't get the same support systems that other players rely on when things get hard. EALA took none of that as an excuse. She went to work on the challenger circuit. She played smaller tournaments. She collected points one match at a time, one tournament at a time, with the kind of patience and discipline that most 21-year-olds simply don't possess. By 2023, she cracked the top 200 for the first time, and from that moment, the trajectory has been consistently, unmistakably upward. Now, 2025 was already the year people started paying attention. She reached the final in Eastbourne. She made a semifinal run at the Miami Open, which was a jaw-dropping achievement on its own because she entered that tournament as a qualifier. A qualifier making a semifinal at the Miami Open. Think about what that requires. Think about the number of matches, the physical and mental endurance, the level of opponent you have to beat just to reach that stage from the qualifying bracket. By the end of 2025, EALA was sitting at around world number 50, a new career high at the time. But 2026 is where the story shifts into a completely different gear. Early in the year, she went on the Middle East swing and reached the quarterfinals of the Abu Dhabi Open, a WTA 500 event. She lost there to world number 11, Alexandrova. But that run pushed her into the world's top 40 for the first time, another career high. There was an early exit at the Qatar Open that followed, but anyone who was tempted to read that as a sign of regression was about to be proven completely wrong. Because then came Indian Wells, the tournament that tennis insiders call the fifth Grand Slam because of its scale, its prestige, and the quality of field it attracts every single year. And EALA made it all the way to the round of 16 at Indian Wells. That run pushed her to a career high of world number 29 at the time, and it marked something genuinely significant. She had broken into the top 30. For any player, cracking the top 30 is a meaningful achievement. But for someone navigating the professional tour without the financial and institutional backing that players from established tennis nations receive, it carries an entirely different weight. It means you've done this largely on your own terms. It means the results are yours, earned point by point, match by match, against some of the best players in the world. Then came the pressure test at Miami, where the ranking system introduced its cruelest dynamic, the defending points situation. Because EALA had made a semifinal in Miami the previous year, she was now required to defend that result. If she couldn't replicate a deep run, her ranking could have tumbled all the way back toward the top 50 or 60 range. That is not a comfortable position for any young player. That is the kind of scenario that exposes mental fragility, that reveals whether a player's previous success was a peak or a foundation. EALA reached the round of 16. She managed the pressure. She kept her ranking stable, even as some expiring points caused a temporary dip to number 45. But temporary was the operative word, because what came next made everything that happened before it look like the warm-up act. Before we get to Wimbledon, we need to spend a moment understanding how the WTA ranking system actually works, because without this context, the significance of EALA's position becomes impossible to fully appreciate. The WTA uses a rolling 52-week system based on a player's best 18 tournament results within that window. Every tournament carries a different point value depending on its tier. Grand Slams offer the most points, followed by WTA 1000 events, then 500s, then 250s, then Challenger and ITF level events. Points are earned based on how deep you advance, and they expire after 52 weeks if you don't replicate the result at that same tournament. This is why players constantly talk about defending points. It's not just about winning new ones. It's about not losing the ones you already have. Now here's where EALA's situation becomes genuinely fascinating from a mathematical standpoint. Last year, during the North American hardcourt swing, she was limited by a left shoulder injury. She managed only a first-round exit at the National Bank Open in Toronto, earning just 10 points and a quarterfinal finish at a smaller ITF event that earned her 25 points. Neither of those results even cracked her active best 18 baseline because she already had stronger results in other tournaments. Then at the US Open, she reached the second round and earned 70 points. Because Grand Slam results count automatically regardless of the best 18 baseline, those 70 points became a fixed part of her ranking total. What this means going forward is extraordinary. When the North American hardcourt swing returns this year, with Toronto, Cincinnati, and the US Open all on the calendar, EALA only has to defend a combined total of 70 points across that entire stretch. 70 points. Most players in her ranking range are defending hundreds of points from deep runs at these same events. The asymmetry is almost unfair in her favor. Any meaningful run at any one of those three tournaments doesn't just add points. It adds them with virtually no risk of losing ground at the same time. That is the kind of structural advantage in the rankings that creates explosive upward movement. And analysts who understand the math have been pointing to this window as the clearest opportunity of EALA's career so far. But all of that is the setup. Wimbledon 2026 is the main event. Alex EALA put together the best Grand Slam performance of her career at Wimbledon 2026. She moved through the early rounds with precision and composure, beating Renata Zarazua and then Maya Joint. And then came the moment that stopped the tennis world cold. She beat the defending Wimbledon champion. She beat one of the top players on the entire tour in a result that can only be described as a career-defining upset. Beating a defending Grand Slam champion at that very same Grand Slam is not something that happens on a good day. It requires an elite level of preparation, mental fortitude, and belief in yourself that cannot be faked under those lights, on that court, in front of that crowd. EALA then advanced to the fourth round, where she eventually lost to 13th seed Jasmine Paolini. But the full run pushed her to a new career high of world number 28, and the response was immediate and global. Players like Coco Gauff publicly praised her performance. Tennis journalists who cover the WTA Tour full-time took notice. And back home in the Philippines, a country where tennis has historically lived in the shadow of basketball and boxing, it felt like a national celebration because the Philippines now has a tennis player competing and winning at the highest level of the sport. That is not a small thing. That is a monumental cultural shift. Now, let's get precise about the top 20 conversation because this is where the numbers matter more than the narrative. Based on the most recent available data, EALA's points total sits in the range of approximately 1,666 to 1,690 points, depending on which week's update you reference. The players immediately above her tell the full story of how tight this situation is. World number 28. Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova sits at 1,667 points. World number 27, Emma Navarro holds 1,674 points. World number 26, Barbara Krejcikova, sits at 1,679 points. The gap between EALA and all three of these players is measured in single digits or low double digits. That is not a gap. That is a margin error. A single strong result reshuffles that entire cluster instantly. And as for the top 20 itself, credible tennis outlets have reported clearly that the gap is surprisingly narrow, and that one deep run at a WTA 1000 event could push EALA into the top 25 or even the top 20. A headline suggesting a gap of over 600 points does not reflect the actual official numbers and represents the kind of exaggerated framing that distorts what is genuinely an already remarkable story. The real picture, the one grounded in actual ranking mathematics, is that EALA is close. Genuinely, verifiably close. Here is what the North American swing holds in terms of opportunity. If EALA reaches a semifinal at either Toronto or Cincinnati, she earns 195 points. A final is worth 325 points. A title delivers the full 500 points. And at the US Open, the place where she won her first ever Grand Slam main draw match last year against Clara Towson, she will likely enter with a seeded position based on her current ranking, which opens the possibility of more favorable early round matchups. Run those numbers against her current total of roughly 1,666 to 1,690 points, and the top 20 threshold, estimated to be somewhere in the 2,200 to 2,400 point range, becomes a completely realistic destination before the year is out. EALA's brother Nali has said publicly that a top 20 finish by year's end is achievable. And that assessment isn't wishful thinking from a sibling. It is backed by the math. It is backed by analysts and journalists covering the WTA Tour who have examined the numbers independently and arrived at the same conclusion. Step back from the statistics for a moment and look at the full arc of this career. A young woman from Manila trains at one of the world's premier academies, wins junior Grand Slam titles before she's old enough to drive, grinds through the challenger circuit without the structural advantages that players from established tennis nations receive, battles through injuries, navigates the mental pressure of defending ranking points at major events, and now stands on the edge of the WTA top 20. She didn't shortcut this. She didn't get handed anything. She built this one match at a time, one tournament at a time, with the kind of relentless consistency that separates players who peak early from players who are genuinely on a long-term ascent. The North American hardcourt swing is the next chapter. Toronto, Cincinnati, the US Open, 3 tournaments, 70 points to defend across all of them, and an entire nation watching every single match. If Alex EALA continues on this trajectory, she won't just set a new career high ranking. She will cement herself as one of the most compelling stories in professional tennis and write her name into Philippine sporting history permanently. The math is real. The moment is real. And the player standing at the center of it has already proven, more than once, that she is more than equal to it.